These bullies thought they were trapping an easy target, a quiet drifter who wouldn't fight back, but they have no idea he's a lethal vigilante, and they're about to find out the hard way. Paul Kersey is being escorted into a holding cell after police found him inside his friend's home, who was already murdered by muggers. The moment the officers leave, several inmates begin sizing him up, eager to start trouble. Paul ignores them and walks away, but Major Obesity takes the dismissal personally and charges him from behind. Paul catches him, drives his head into the steel bars, and calmly sits down as the rest of the cell erupts in laughter. The confrontation appears finished until Paul notices Fraker watching him with unsettling boredom. Fraker gives a silent signal, which passes through the cell until two inmates rush Paul at once. He drops them within seconds, but one hooks his leg from the floor and brings him down. Fraker and the others immediately swarm him, hammering him with punches and kicks. Smirking, Fraker boasts that he always comes out on top and casually sits in front of him, only for Paul to rise and crack him square in the face. The inmates pile onto Paul again as Fraker unloads a relentless barrage of punches. Hearing the chaos, officers storm the cell block and drag the two men apart before the fight can escalate further, locking Paul and Fraker in separate cells. An officer then informs Fraker that he will be released in 5 minutes. Fraker sneers at Paul, claiming the guard saved his life, then promises to murder an old woman in Paul's honor once he is back outside. Before leaving, he invites Paul to visit his territory in Sutter and Belmont whenever he has time to spare. His release hits a brief delay when the police chief tells him the paperwork will take another 2 hours. Fraker explodes, remembering that he promised Paul the murder would make the 6 o'clock news, but quickly realizes he still has enough time. His fury instantly turns into a disturbingly cheerful smile as he agrees to wait. Elsewhere, Public Defender Kathryn Davis confronts Inspector Shriker, demanding to know why Paul remains locked up despite committing no crime. She threatens legal action and orders Shriker to release him, but the inspector politely refuses. Shriker has a larger problem on his hands. During a departmental briefing, he demands progress on Belmont's escalating gang violence, only to learn that reported crime has climbed another 11%. He soon brings Paul into his office and asks where he has been all this time. Paul casually claims he was resting in the countryside, but Shriker already knows better. He has compiled an extensive file documenting the gang members and mugger rapists Paul has killed across multiple cities, leaving only one question: what is he doing in Belmont? Rather than arresting him, Shriker offers a choice. Paul can abandon vigilantism completely or continue his crusade under police supervision. If he refuses both options, Shriker promises to keep him trapped in Belmont until hell freezes over. He empties Paul's belongings onto the desk, removes his handgun, and returns everything else. When Paul asks why the weapon is being confiscated, Shriker bluntly explains that firearms are illegal inside the city. Meanwhile, Fraker quietly returns to the hideout of the street punk gang, Belmont's deadliest crew. He warns the lookout to keep his arrival secret, then finds his right-hand man, Hector, barking orders as though the gang now belongs to him. Hector reminds Fraker that he was told to take charge while he was away, but Fraker has no intention of sharing authority. He pulls a shiv, orders the gang to restrain Hector, and cuts through him like ground beef, instantly reclaiming control. Back at the station, Kathryn informs Paul that he is finally being released and apologizes for the delay. She is surprised that he refuses to press charges against Shriker for holding him with no charges and urges him to reconsider. Before he leaves, Kathryn gives him her card and asks where she can reach him. Paul offers no answer. The moment he steps onto the streets, Belmont's lawlessness becomes impossible to ignore. Paul spots a mugger known as the Giggler attempting to rob a helpless woman and intervenes, forcing him to back away. Nearby, another thug harasses a woman with crude sexual remarks. She panics and floors the accelerator, but the mugger clings to the windscreen as the car speeds off. Paul follows them into a dim parking garage, pulls the attacker away from the vehicle, and gives the shaken woman enough time to escape. Continuing through the neighborhood, Paul is called over by Bennett, an old friend of Charlie's who recognizes him from the stories Charlie used to tell. Bennett invites him inside and proudly shows him a photograph of himself and Charlie during World War II. Paul remembers meeting Charlie years later while serving as a conscientious objector during the Korean War. Bennett explains that he moved to Belmont after his wife died a few months earlier, hoping the neighborhood would offer him a fresh start. Instead, he arrived just as the area was collapsing. Paul reveals that Charlie was murdered after refusing to pay protection money to local punks. Bennett adds that the gang also attacked several elderly residents before fleeing. When Paul asks who did it, Bennett points out 3 men with painted faces nearby, identifying them as members of the street punk gang, and the same men he saw escaping the scene. He also points out Fraker, their ruthless leader, and the most dangerous man among them. According to Bennett, anyone who tries to reach Fraker is usually chopped into pieces long before getting close. Paul urges Bennett to leave Belmont, but Bennett has nowhere else to go. His business, belongings, and entire life are tied to the neighborhood. When Bennett asks whether Paul plans to leave, Paul explains that Charlie was still alive when he reached the apartment and asked him to watch over his belongings until he returned. Paul pulls out Charlie's keys and adds that the rent is already paid through the end of the month. For now, he intends to honor his friend's final request, and that keeps him directly inside Fraker's territory. The following morning, Bennett tells Paul more about the giggler, a notorious mugger who laughs hysterically every time he escapes the police. No matter how often officers chase him, he always slips away. Only a month earlier, he drove a knife straight into a man's skull, earning his place among the most feared criminals in Belmont. Their conversation is interrupted by Rodriguez and his wife, Monia. Rodriguez asks whether Paul is the stranger who rescued her in the parking garage, then sincerely thanks him and promises to return the favor whenever needed. When Paul asks why the police never helped, Rodriguez bitterly replies that they seem far more interested in issuing parking tickets than protecting innocent people. The next day, Paul tells Bennett that an old friend named Wildie is coming to visit. Later that evening, he joins Bennett and their neighbors, Eli and his wife Erica, for dinner. The four are settling into their meal when the sound of shattering glass suddenly cuts through the conversation. Paul steps outside and finds several muggers surrounding his car. When he asks what they are doing, they tell him to stay out of it, only to learn that the car belongs to him. Their threats quickly follow, but Paul answers by pulling out his sausage and firing at them. Once he returns inside, Bennett asks what happened, and Paul calmly explains that he sent the attackers a message. The police cruise through the neighborhood the following day, but the street punk gang chases them off before confronting a rival crew for crossing into their territory. As Fraker walks away with his men, Shriker orders his officers to start arresting the degenerates killing one another in the streets. Their response comes too late for Rodriguez and Monia. Gang members shove Rodriguez aside and begin attacking his wife, forcing Paul to intervene again. A young boy cheers him on as Paul drives the punks away, then checks that the couple are all right. Rodriguez introduces him to their new neighbors, Emil and his wife, Magda, adding 2 more residents to the community now living under Fraker's shadow. Word of Paul's interference soon reaches Fraker, who promises to handle Belmont's newest problem himself. He calls Charlie's apartment and asks whether Paul is staying there. When Paul confirms it, Fraker tells him that Charlie no longer needs anyone's help because he is dead, then warns that Paul will soon join him. He makes it clear that he is always watching before hanging up. Paul checks outside and discovers dark footprints leading toward the window, confirming that someone has already been snooping around. Rather than wait for the next intrusion, he rigs a checkerboard with nails beneath the window. That evening, Paul spots Shriker waiting on a nearby corner. The inspector asks him to deliver an arrest so a tactical squad can move in, but Paul refuses to do the police department's work for them. Instead, he asks why Shriker keeps targeting the smaller roaches while leaving Fraker untouched. Paul's trap proves more effective. He later discovers blood leading across the floor toward the shattered window. At the gang's hideout, the injured thug complains about his mangled foot, sending Fraker into another rage. While the others argue that they need a different approach, the giggler simply bursts into his trademark laughter, enjoying every second of the chaos. The next day, Paul watches a thug harass a woman but deliberately refuses to intervene, wary of playing directly into Shriker's hands. Moments later, Kathryn pulls up beside him. She admits that she knew he would never call, so after reading Shriker's arrest report, she followed her instincts and guessed where he was staying. Paul tells her not to worry about him, but Kathryn asks him to dinner instead. He gestures toward the lawless streets and points out that nowhere in Belmont is safe. Kathryn reminds him that she is not some sheltered city girl and demands an answer before she gets mugged herself. When she asks what he is really doing there, Paul claims he is investigating Charlie's death for a book. Kathryn clearly doubts the excuse, but he eventually agrees to dinner on Friday night. Fraker watches Kathryn drive away, silently registering Paul's connection to her. Soon afterward, police storm Eli's home after receiving reports that he has been brandishing a firearm. They threaten to arrest him unless he turns it over. And although Eli resists, his wife persuades him to surrender the weapon. The consequences arrive that same night when muggers break into their home, rob them, and warn that they will return whenever they please. Eli recounts the attack to Paul and Bennett the next day, giving Paul another problem to solve before the gang comes back. At the street punk gang's headquarters, one member complains that he is short on cash and wants some entertainment. Fraker gives the gang 20 minutes to go play before returning to work, making the violence he expects painfully clear. Paul, Bennett, Eli, and his wife are still eating dinner when a scream tears through the neighborhood. Paul rushes to the window and finds human teeth embedded in the wooden frame outside, a gruesome sign of what Fraker's idea of play looks like. Seconds later, the giggler snatches a pedestrian's handbag and races away. Paul and Rodriguez chase him through the streets, but the laughing mugger escapes once again. Afterward, Rodriguez asks whether Eli can still help. The answer arrives in a package. Paul gathers everyone around and announces that the Wildie delivery has finally come. Inside is a massive .475 Wildie Magnum, a shortened version of the African big game cartridge, powerful enough to replace the gun the police confiscated. For the first time since entering Belmont, Paul has the firepower to match the violence surrounding him. That same night, the gang ambushes Manya, drags her away, and brutally assaults her. Rodriguez receives a devastating call the next morning, informing him that she has been found alive but badly injured, with a broken arm and severe trauma. Everyone rushes to Baptist Medical Center, hoping she can survive, only for the doctors to reveal that a blood clot caused by the attack has killed her. Rodriguez collapses in tears, and Monya's death pushes Paul past the restraint he has maintained since arriving. Sometime later, Paul tells Bennett that he is going out for ice cream and casually carries an expensive camera with him. At a nearby grocery store, he buys one ice cream for himself and another for the young boy who cheered him on during the earlier confrontation. The moment Paul steps outside, the giggler notices the camera and approaches with his familiar hysterical laugh, believing he has found another easy victim. This time, Paul has deliberately given him something to steal. As the giggler reaches for the camera, Paul draws the Wildie Magnum and kills him with a single shot. After years of watching the mugger terrorize their streets and escape every consequence, the entire neighborhood erupts in cheers. Elsewhere, the street punk gang erupts over the giggler's death, with several members demanding immediate revenge. Fraker remains unusually calm, reminding them that confronting Paul head-on was never the smart move. Soon afterward, Shriker arrives at the crime scene and learns that Belmont has already grown noticeably quieter. Rather than mourn the dead mugger, he studies the body and remarks that whoever fired the shot was an exceptional marksman, quietly confirming what his officers already suspect. Paul later visits Kathryn, who begins pressing against the emotional walls he keeps around himself. She asks whether he is afraid to let someone get close again, and Paul admits that he may be before turning the question back on her. Kathryn says she normally enjoys being a public defender, but hates representing criminals she knows are guilty. To her, Paul is one of the gentlest men she has ever met, yet she has watched too many gentle people become victims. Frustrated by his refusal to show anger, she asks why nothing ever seems to reach him and even jokes about whether he truly enjoys opera. Paul avoids answering and prepares to leave, but the two share a kiss before he goes. Neither of them knows that Fraker is already gathering his gang and pumping them full of drugs for the next attack. Outside, Paul spots Fraker moving through the streets and follows him from a distance. One gang member slips into a nearby building, prompting Paul to take cover just before another thug bursts out and opens fire. Paul narrowly avoids the bullets but loses his handgun in the confusion. Fraker immediately orders his men to circle behind him, forcing the now unarmed Paul into a nearby warehouse. He stabs one attacker, knocks down another, and tries to escape, only to find Fraker and more gang members waiting outside. Fraker offers Paul to his men, but Paul climbs his way out before they can surround him. Shriker visits him the following morning and dryly remarks that the coroner is suddenly hiring extra help. Paul refuses to celebrate the bodies piling up, warning that Fraker is still alive and that eliminating underlings means nothing, while the gang's leader remains untouched. Fraker proves him right almost immediately. He calls Emil and orders him home, claiming that Magda is dying because Emil threw one of his men out of the store the previous week. Emil rushes back and finds Fraker waiting near the window. Soon afterward, Fraker calls Paul and makes it clear that the attack happened because Paul made him angry. Paul meets Bennett and asks about Emil's condition. Bennett says the man is finished, then bitterly reflects that no one had broken through his windows in more than 20 years before Fraker's gang arrived. Charlie had warned him that the neighborhood might one day come under attack, and Bennett reveals the surprise he prepared for that moment. A .30 caliber Browning machine gun Charlie brought home from the war. He asks Paul whether the ammunition is still usable, eager to unleash it the next time the gang comes near. Paul rejects the idea, warning that too many innocent people could be hit. Fraker wants him, not the entire neighborhood, so Paul believes leaving might ease the pressure on everyone else. He asks Bennett to give him one day to deal with Fraker first. Paul drives away without realizing that Fraker and his men are following him. He visits Kathryn, who tells him she's leaving the city and says she only wanted to see him one final time. After getting intimate, she asks whether he still believes he cannot give another woman a chance. Paul finally explains that something inside him changed after muggers killed his wife and daughter. Kathryn tells him that leaving the city does not mean disappearing from her life and suggests they get something to eat. They drive off while Fraker's men remain outside watching. When they stop near a store, Paul briefly steps away. Fraker appears the moment he is gone, knocks Kathryn unconscious, starts the car, and sends it crashing into another vehicle. Paul emerges just in time to see the wreck erupt in flames. Unable to reach her, he walks away devastated, having lost another woman to the same violence that already destroyed his family. Shriker soon finds Paul and tells him to take things easy for a few days. Once Paul moves on, however, the inspector orders his officers to place him in protective custody. Fraker continues dismantling everything around him. Bennett is restrained while his shop is blown apart, and firefighters struggle to contain the flames. Desperate for help, Bennett rushes to Charlie's apartment but finds Paul gone. Gang members begin hurling stones through his window, forcing him to reach for the hidden Browning. The weapon fails to fire in time, and the attackers beat him to the floor before casually leaving him behind. Rodriguez finds Bennett and stays with him until help arrives. At the station, Paul demands to speak with Shriker. The inspector arrives with news that a badly beaten man at the hospital is willing to identify his attackers, but only after speaking privately with Paul. A doctor explains that Bennett has suffered several fractures, but will survive. Once they are alone, Bennett tells Paul that the gang only cost him one gun. He has another hidden away and urges Paul to use it to wipe them out. When Shriker returns, Bennett simply tells him that Paul had somewhere to be. Paul soon arrives at Charlie's apartment by taxi carrying several packages. Fraker's scouts spot him and rush to alert the gang, while Rodriguez eagerly helps Paul bring out the .30 caliber Browning. Paul explains that the weapon can tear through both vehicles and people, but it will only be effective if they can force Fraker's men into a concentrated group. Rodriguez admits that all he has is a crude zip gun, so Paul tells him they will need several more. Fraker and his gang soon flood the neighborhood, only for Paul and Rodriguez to meet them with the Browning. Gunfire rips through the street as they chase attackers into alleys and blast others from rooftops. Fraker's reinforcements pour in, turning Belmont into an open war zone. Paul interrupts another assault on a woman with a burst of gunfire, while Fraker takes cover behind a tree and shoots at the arriving police. Two men pin Paul behind a wall, but he picks them off like a bad drama and keeps moving. Across town, Eli and his wife watch live news coverage of the riot, while Fraker realizes the entire city can now see his gang being dismantled and retreats from the cameras. Paul catches more gang members attempting to flee with the same woman they had attacked earlier. Even the injured Emil reacts with excitement as residents and police finally begin pushing back. When the punks race through the neighborhood in their Lamborghinis, armed locals open fire, forcing them to surrender their weapons. Fraker's men retaliate by setting a building ablaze and shooting at fleeing victims. One resident opens his door and is immediately impaled with a knife. But Paul emerges from hiding and takes down more attackers while Rodriguez leaves to find additional ammunition. Paul reaches his final rounds just as another gunman takes aim at him. Shriker appears and drops the attacker first, telling Paul that he now owes him one. The inspector and Vigilante take cover together behind a bin, eliminating the last gang members surrounding them before splitting up to clear the remaining streets. Men hurl flaming torches at Paul, but he dodges the attacks and fires back. One punk tries forcing his way into a house, only for an armed woman inside to blast him away with her sausage. As Paul and Shriker reload, Fraker finally charges them both. Paul warns that he cannot attack two men at once, forcing him to choose. Fraker turns towards Shriker, and Paul uses the opening to shoot him into the flames. His burning body collapses in front of the gang members who once followed him without question. With their leader dead and police flooding the neighborhood, the surviving punks immediately scatter. Shriker silently watches Paul across the ruined street, but makes no attempt to stop him as he walks away.